Welcome to The Real Dope, a podcast for anyone walking alongside someone battling addiction, based on the powerful book, The Real Dope on Dealing with an Addict, by sisters Elizabeth Brand and Meridith Elliott Powell. Each episode will explore practical strategies, share authentic stories, and provide the honest guidance. Let's begin today's journey and turn survival into strength.
Hey, this is Meredith Elliott Powell, and you know what time it is. It is 11 a.m. Eastern on a Thursday morning. It's one of my favorite times of the week because it is time for the real dope, the time where we talk about what it means to love, support, and just quite frankly, have to deal with having addicts in your life. Hanging out here with my sister, Beth Brand. Now,
Hello.
as I always like to remind you, we are not doctors, we are not even therapists. I think we're a little bit better than that. We're people
Well, I
that
don't know,
actually
I don't know.
we're
No, but we have lived it.
We have lived it. And so what this show is, it's dedicated not to addicts, it's dedicated to people who love addicts. So Beth, what's on tap for today?
Okay, so today we are going to discuss, where to go to learn about the disease because we both really think it's important the more you educate yourself about addiction, and not just addiction, but also enabling, both together, um, the more you know, the more you'll be able to see your own patterns, see the patterns you're dealing with, and help yourself and the person you love.
Where do we begin with education? I mean, for me, when I think about education, I think one of the most important things that I did was really learn to understand the disease, was to really learn to understand what is going on in the mind of an addict. I had dinner last night with somebody who was a substance abuse counselor, and we were talking about the lengths that people will go to for addiction. I mean, what they will give up in order just to feed the addiction. And I don't think you're in a place when you first get into this to really understand who you're dealing with, what you're dealing with, and how the disease can impact your life.
Well, I think you can't believe it because it makes no sense. So I think that's so one thing when you brought up this topic in the first place, I thought about our brother Ted, and I
Mhm.
thought about, how, he was a 5 on the Enneagram. He absorbed information. That was his thing, that was his go-to, that was his comfort, was information, and he would read all kinds of books, and he kept trying to read books that told him what he wanted to hear
Yeah.
about his own addiction. Like, he just kept trying to figure out how to be able to keep drinking, but straighten out his life. And to me, what made me think maybe we should start this off with is there no addiction is a very confusing illness, and there are all kinds of books out there that, give you, "Do this, do that," or "This is a wrong approach, and I have the right approach." Just like dieting or anything else, nobody has the right approach. You have to find the right approach for yourself, but also be really aware of scammers. They know you're desperate,
Yeah.
so you have to be really careful that whatever you learn about and whoever you go to for information, it's tried and true, and there's somebody with credibility behind it in one way or the other, whether that credibility is, they've lived through it themselves or, they have a PhD in addiction or whatever. So that's what I would start off thinking about. Just be careful. Don't look for a magic bullet because there isn't one.
Yeah, I also think that one of the most important things when it comes to this is, like, I think it's really hard to find anybody you trust because they
Mhm.
don't know. So when I think of education, and I first brought up this topic, I think you need to dive in, and I think you really need to understand the disease because as I've said this before on this podcast, one of the most powerful things, that I learned was that the person that I love is not in there. Well, I needed to understand
Mhm.
how alcohol changed brain chemistry. I needed to know what was going on in the mind of an addict and just to understand how what alcohol or drugs did to their body. Because the moment that my husband gave up alcohol, he just went to drugs. I mean, it was
Mhm.
whatever keep him numb. It didn't
Well,
really matter, you know?
I mean, Edward didn't drink ever,
Mhm. Right.
but when I knew him, but when that was the last thing available to him, that's what he did.
Yeah. And so, I think understanding that the moment that too much alcohol or too many drugs enter the system, like I don't know exactly how it works, but dopamine is flooding the brain, and when it is flooding the brain, all they want is more dopamine. I mean, nothing feels better than a dopamine hit, so if you have so much coming through your brain, all you want is more of it.
That's why everybody chases that first high.
Right,
You're never as high on any substance as you are the first time you do it, and you just
right.
keep chasing the whole time. But anyway, so, like, do you have a favorite book
A
that you
favorite
love
book
that
that
really helped you? I mean
Well, I think one of the books that really helped me on it was our book. I mean, that was the
yeah.
one that I don't know that anything I read before that I would get little bits here and there, but the books that really helped me were the ones that were like spiritual, let go and let God type
Mhm.
of books. I remember being in Sue Fazio's house and seeing a book on her ping pong table. I forget the name of it now, but I read that book, and it was the first time that anything really convinced me that I was very powerless over
Mm.
what was going on, and I needed to just trust the journey.
So for me, like getting into the mind of the addict, and I read this after, of course, after everything that we'd been through. But William Cope Moyers, who we got
Mhm.
to meet at one of the seminars, I got to speak.
Yeah.
He was great. He wrote a book called Broken:
Mhm.
My Story of Addiction and Redemption, and he was a crack addict, I believe, or methamphetamine crack, I don't even know. But like that, he was like on something like that, and it was just so interesting because he had the best of the best. He had the best help, he had a loving family, he had everything he could have needed, like, to succeed in the recovery world. Yet it took him, like, 3 or 4 times in recovery to finally, like, really recover and get it and pull his life back together. But what I loved about that book so much was it really got into the mind of the addict. It really helped you understand what his thinking was through the whole process. And how much, you hate yourself through the whole thing, and you can't believe you drug his family through this, and yeah.
First of all, I thought one of the most powerful things when I remember him speaking, what he said was the low percentage of people that ever recover from addiction, how much money is spent on it, and I think that's an important reality to face. I think the other is I remember reading an article about Eric Clapton and his recovery.
Mhm,
And he said that the thing you need to understand about addiction, and this really helped me, was he said that and if you had cancer or you had anything, any other disease, the most important thing you need to help you through the disease is your brain. And the problem with addiction is when you're addicted, the thing you need the most is the part of you that is sick. And that really struck me. He said there's nothing to grab onto to try to recover because the rational, the motivated, the supportive, the thing that would go to help you, find information. He said it is just sick with the addiction and you have nowhere till you get a hold of that, you can't get the help you need.
and I think that's where it's like, and it's with really a lot of mental illness, with families and mental illness. I mean, that happens, like, a lot because you can't get through to your loved one, and that's the
Right.
same thing with addiction, like, they're ill, you can't get through to them, and I think that's what makes it, like, just extra frustrating too.
Yeah.
Because you can't tap back into them. But he's really right, the thing they need to succeed. So what you need to do as an enabler is start to work on yourself,
Mhm.
to help them become clearer by working on yourself and keeping yourself sane so that they can see what to come back to.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
what did you think of Codependent No More with Melanie Beatty?
I didn't get a lot out of it, but I may have just been too codependent at the time.
I think it was early in the thing, like, she was the first to, like, really come out with a big book who said, this is I call it something, put a label on our own
Mhm.
behaviors,
That's true.
and I think that's the important thing, and she's gone on they've redone the book a million times, I haven't read it. I read the original, I haven't read the up ones, and then she has workbooks and stuff. I think that that's, like, a good place to start. I think enabling and codependency has grown a lot since she's written that
I
book,
would
and
agree.
maybe the latest versions of her book have grown too. I don't really know because I haven't read them, but it's not gonna hurt you to, like, start there and think about that to get a handle on what was happening, and her thinking was so, relatable.
Yeah, I also think it was really ahead of her time because she was
Mhm.
the first one to really put a label on it and to really say, you need to look at yourself and you need to look at your behavior. When I read that book, I was still living I think Doug was still alive, and I think we were still living together, is that, um, I remember it was kind of some of the first beginnings of thinking, "Okay, maybe there," for lack of a better way to put it, "there is something wrong with me or something I need to look at in my own
Mhm. There's
behavior."
something's happening to me too, because
Yeah.
it's you're in a dynamic situation. When you live with somebody and you love somebody, like, what happens to them happens to you. You're in a dynamic situation, and that's why it's so dangerous for people who have gone through recovery to just pop back home if the enablers have not done any work on themselves.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things education-wise for me was to realize how much I was using the addiction to make excuses for the
Mhm,
advancements I didn't
mhm,
wanna make in my own life. I mean, there were things I wanted to do with my career that I didn't do. There were things I wanted to do sports-wise or relationships-wise, health-wise, all of those, and I just used it as an excuse not to have to push out of my comfort zone to
mhm,
do any of those things,
mhm.
you know?
Yes, I do know, 'cause, I lived that myself, for sure, I
And
hid behind it.
and I think getting in there and educating yourself on what the addiction is doing to you is a very important thing to do.
Yeah, it blew my mind when we were writing our book, it blew my mind when I guess I always knew it, but it really because you have to have so much clarity when you start to put things on paper, that we had all the same behaviors.
Yes.
All the lying, the cheating, everything that we blamed the addict in our life for, we were totally doing, you
Yeah,
know, and
yeah.
that'll blow your mind, I think.
Ye and I think of how many times I was so mad at Doug for hiding so much stuff, and then I think of how much I hid from my
Yeah,
friends,
yeah.
you know, things like that. I think, I keep going back to this idea, and I'd be interested to see, I don't know of a book out there, but, these days you could, just probably spend enough time online and really find it. But I just think to understand what addiction does, again, to, I said dopamine, but I also what it does to self control. I mean, there to really, because, oh, you're always saying, please don't drink, please don't take that drug, please don't do this. And they say, yes, I won't, because they don't want that either.
Mhm,
But that the amount of it's almost like they lose their whole decision-making process.
mhm.
And I don't know if that's something that alcohol or drugs wears down, but, I mean, they're really very powerless to stop.
So
Like, the brain stops working.
do you remember that the documentary we watched in 2007? It was on HBO, which I guess is called Max now. I don't know if they have it was called Addiction, and I'm sure the science has gone, like, way over what it had in 2007, but it was really good on explaining that. It had the person from the National Institutes of Health and
Mhm.
everything explaining the science of addiction on the brain. That was good.
I don't remember that. I should go back in and rewatch it. So that's a good thing we should put in the show notes because 'cause that'd probably be a really, really good thing, a really good thing.
It was like a five-part documentary. It
Yeah.
was really good. And there's
I
a book that went with it. I think I ordered the book too, but I don't remember.
I also like, the reason I wanted to discuss the topic was I also thought, like, education just started to calm my own anxiety down.
Mm. Mhm.
Like, the more that I knew and the more that I learned, it didn't change anything in my life other than my own education, but it started to relax me with what I was dealing with. It started less really needing to control the situation.
Well, I think it let you know, 1, that you're not crazy,
Mhm.
that there's a pattern to this and other people are experiencing the same thing. And, number 2 is that you really don't have control. That
Right.
there's a by the point that they have addiction issues, there's a biological thing going on that you can't stop, that it's gonna take more than just you to stop,
I
or you're
also
asking.
Yeah, I also think you need to educate yourself, and I think this our book did such a good job on this, on what you need to look for, the signs of because, you know, um, somebody was talking the other day about, I was talking about Ted and kind of the whole incident with mother and when he killed himself. But do you remember before that when I forget what it's called now, but when the liver stops processing and everything goes straight to the brain and they start
Ammonia brain.
yeah, they start projectile vomiting, blood and things
Mhm,
like that. And I think just to educate yourself, that would be so incredibly scary if you didn't know what it was. It still is
mhm,
scary, but
it's
if you
very
didn't know
scary.
what it was and what was coming,
Mhm,
you know? I mean, I think you need to educate yourself on what the stages of alcoholism look like, what the stages of drug
and
addiction
also you
look
need
like.
to do that so that when they start they'll give a certain excuse at a certain period of whatever stage they're in. And then when they give that excuse to you, when you say one thing and they say another, and you're doing this dance, you realize that it's a pattern. It's not even them. Like, it's just a patterned response, that they're giving depending on the stage of their alcoholism or addiction.
You also need to understand what you need to educate yourself on legally what you're responsible for,
Mhm,
and legally, and what you're not.
mhm, definitely. And you can get a lot of this information you can get at Al-Anon or at other things. And, do you remember those, ladies in Greenville
Yeah.
that have so they're really, really good, and they're really family, and, so so she has a podcast called Put the Shovel Down.
Mhm.
It's Amber Hollingsworth is her name, and they're the Family Recovery Academy, and I really like their approach. I think our approaches agree with them, and, it's a counseling service, but they focus on the family as well as the person with the addiction, they do both. And, yeah, and she has a YouTube series called Put the Shovel Down, where you can just learn a lot about addiction, about enabling, about what works and what doesn't, about what's going on, about the patterns. She's been doing this for, she's been counseling this for, 20 years, and she has really great people on her team. But also, she's been doing these, um, videos for at least 7 years, I think, if not more.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's a whole series of them on every subject that you can think of.
Do you
It's really
think that
good.
you should educate yourself on the type of help that's out there for your addict? Do you think that's a good investment of your time?
I think you should know what's available, but I don't think you should do anything about it. I think that, if you get into counseling for yourself, that kinda thing will naturally come along, but you can't force a person into recovery. I mean, that's a mistake our mother made over and over again. I mean, recovery, they have to go into it themselves because they have to want to, and then you also have to realize it's probably not gonna work the first time, and it's so
Mhm.
expensive.
Yeah,
So,
it's I
I
mean,
don't
it's
know. I don't think there's anything wrong if it makes you feel better to know what's available, but the worry there for me would be that you would try to steer you're like, "It's all ready, all you have to do is say yes," and you're putting the money down, which can
yeah,
use I mean, you couldn't even let, Doug go to the gym.
yeah,
You coulda forced him into recovery at one point, you would've,
yeah.
and soon enough, recovery turns into them just going to jail, and that's enough of a recovery for us.
Well, I also think you need to educate yourself about how your own behavior is impacting the addict,
Oh, definitely.
you
I mean,
know?
that's the whole kit and caboodle for this, podcast is that, that there is something you can do, and what you can do is figure out your own issues so that you stop feeding this addiction by being a ranting, raving enabler. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure, for sure. But I do think going back to your other question about finding out what's available, to me, it would calm my mind to find out what was available, and so but it's a slippery slope into then, doing your enabling thing and taking control of the situation.
yeah, yeah. I think another good important part of your education thing is if you know anybody who is a recovering addict and to learn from them and to talk to get advice and input from them on what your role is now, because they can tell you better than anybody else what the difference between support and help really looks like,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah, and enabling and yeah, and what they needed and what they didn't need
Yeah.
after
Yeah.
it. Yeah, which might be a very good, resource because we're enablers and we're gonna enable, and it gives us comfort. I mean, it's our addiction, it's what gives us the dopamine hit, you know? You go up to the gym and you pay for Doug's, thing, and then you just feel like, "Whew, it's over, it's good."
Yeah.
You know, "I
Yeah.
paid for this gym, now he'll go." But he won't because he didn't do it himself.
Yeah. I think the other thing that's really good to educate yourself on when when it comes to addiction is navigating the legal system. I mean, like, the first couple of times Doug went to jail, I bailed him out. I got him out of there. And those are things that, and it did nothing but get progressively worse. And then you look at mother, but and in the situation that she was in. But getting enough education so you don't feel a responsibility to constantly be in the middle of their financial or legal
Mhm,
situations,
mhm.
you know?
But, it's also hard to walk away if it's a child or if it's a spouse that you're married to and not separated from, because you feel like that's you legally too. So, if you educate yourself and you know what happens and you know what the if you don't educate yourself, you're gonna become educated no matter what, but it would be better to have understood it before it happened.
Yeah,
And also, like, just and this is information I think you can only get from talking to people like us or talking to people who are in recovery, like what happens at the hospital, what you can expect from the doctors and what you can't expect from the doctors. And basically, they're just trying to get the person out of the hospital,
yeah.
through that and what you can expect from doctors and what you can't expect from doctors. I don't know, of all the doctors that we had, and we had a million of them with Edward, like, not nobody helped.
Well, I think do you remember, my husband's a retired dentist, and I don't know if you remember him saying this, but basically that unless they are a doctor who specializes in addiction,
Mhm.
they're not educated on this.
Mm-mm.
And so giving somebody a prescription, I mean, it's better now than it used to be, but they're not educated on the signs to look for addiction. They're not educated on those things. And nobody is a better master manipulator than an
Right,
addict.
right.
So, and I think that we are raised in a world where doctors are right. And if doctors give us advice and input, that we should just follow that advice. Or if we're treated badly by doctors, that we should just accept it, because there were a lot of times that I was treated very badly by
Me too.
doctors. And
Me
to
too.
some degree, I understand it. I mean, my husband was a major pain in the backside, you know, but it was, I was too timid and too afraid to take the steps and the stance that I needed to take.
Well, I even took some steps and it didn't matter because they were gonna move him through the system no matter what they were gonna do. So, I think it's also a subject that medicine doesn't like because there is no protocol for it. There is no one thing that you do,
Yeah.
So it's a confusing thing. But, yeah, don't expect the hospital to just be that helpful. They'll stabilize him and then they'll send him home.
Yeah, and I think just to read as much as you can about addiction. I mean, unfortunately, when you love an addict, whether it's somebody you fall in love with, whether it's somebody you're related to, or somebody a child, that the more that you can do to read and to understand, or like you said, listen to podcasts or things, it's gonna give you confidence, it's gonna calm your anxiety, it's gonna give you more information, because you have really got to understand that once that addiction takes hold, you are no longer working or living with a rational human being, you know? Yeah.
Including yourself.
Yes.
It's driven you crazy. You're not where you're doing things you don't wanna do doing things you don't wanna do. So, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
A
and
and I think you also need to, fundamentally understand that addiction, and educate yourself on the fact that addiction does not mean just alcohol and drugs. It expands way, way beyond that. And I mean, even my addiction to, you know, messed up human beings, so I could go in there and I could be in control and I could fix, everything, I think is really important to know. It's just a complicated issue,
yeah.
and it's an issue that is pervasive in our society. How many people are functioning their way through it, but it is, causing really, really challenging behaviors. And I feel like educating yourself, the reason I wanted to talk about it in the podcast is it gives you something to do
Yeah.
rather than try
It
to fix or change the addict. It
Mhm.
gives you something to focus on and you something that you can try and do and control and, take up your time so that you're not continuing in the circle of trying to really fix the addict and making the situation worse.
And again, just be really careful with whatever source you use. If you go, like, down the rabbit hole on YouTube or something, just be careful that your sources are credible and they're just not people who aren't credible or who are trying to sell you something.
Yeah, and yeah, because I don't think that other than rehab, and if an addict wants to go to rehab, but you also have to be really careful of
Rehabs
rehabs.
yeah, there's it's a as we learned, it's the Wild West out there. There are no like, we could call ourselves addiction coaches if we
Mhm.
wanted to, and
Right.
yeah, and the people would think that we had some kind of certification, and we do not, but we could go into that business tomorrow. We
Mhm.
can hang a shingle out. There's no in most states, there are no you don't have to have a license or anything. There's no schooling attached, there's nothing. So
Yeah, and I know the first time that Doug went to rehab, they just took him alcohol away and they just gave him drugs.
mm.
And it was, but I didn't know what to look for. And, I mean,
Well,
that's why
well, like, just educate yourself that alcohol is the scariest thing to detox from.
yeah. Yeah,
It's worse
that there's
than
gotta be somebody there. It's alcohol and heroin, right?
mhm, I
Yeah,
think so.
that somebody's gotta be there to, to watch them and to, and definitely to watch over them. Information is just power, and the more you know and the more you understand, the more you're gonna make better decisions as to where you interfere or why you interfere, because sometimes you will interfere just because it's completely comfortable for you to do some, but you'll learn that you should have no expectation of, of a change. You know? So, I'm gonna reach out to Amber because 'cause I'd really like to get her on the podcast.
Okay, good, good.
Yeah.
She's so good, she's so good. Her podcasts are just they're excellent, and like I said, she covers the gambit from if you're the addicted person or if you're the family, because she just sees that dynamic, and I mean, I've recommended her to so many people who've asked me about this because or her whole group. I like everybody in her group that I met, like, 10 years ago, whatever that was, but still, she's just good.
Yeah. Um, do you have any thoughts about what you wanna cover next week?
I do. I don't know how
Okay.
you feel about this, but
Alright.
I would like to talk about trauma.
Oh,
I would like to talk about the fact that a family dealing with addiction is dealing with trauma.
trauma.
Yeah, I was reading a book this week with my a friend of mine about cults and conversion out of a cult, and the person was talking about trauma and complex trauma, and it reminded me so much of what we lived through. I everything in this book about this person, like, getting out of this cult, now she's become a psychologist, and she's written this book. Just I'm like, "We live that. That's us." You and me. That's
Mhm.
addiction. So, I think I would like to talk about trauma and complex trauma and coming to terms with the fact that if you're living with addiction, you are experiencing trauma. You're having
I think I think that's a great subject because I
mhm.
definitely have post-traumatic stress.
Yes, don't you?
Yes.
It's serious, it's true. It's
Mhm.
true.
I
Yeah,
mean, so much so that I had to ask my husband to stop drinking.
yeah,
Yeah, which is totally unfair, but I
yeah,
was lucky.
yeah, I thought about you the other day, we were somewhere and somebody really started drinking a lot, and I'm like, "Ugh." Even me, who I don't care if I drink, I don't care if other people drink, but I still, like, they're not allowed to drink too much
Yeah.
if they're gonna
Yeah.
be around me.
Yeah, and yeah, so I think that's a great subject. All right, what's your biggest
Okay.
takeaway from today?
I just think just the whole subject of just educate yourself, grab what you can, where you can, books, podcasts, G go see if you can find on Max that, the documentary was called Addiction, so that should be easy to remember, and just, yeah, educate yourself. That
My
would be
biggest takeaway from today is that it's you have idle hands when you are in love with an addict or love an addict or have a child who's an addict or you're at the end of the rope and wish you could get out, but you can't. I used to think about this all the time that it was as hard for Doug to stop drinking as it was for me to stop interfering. And I would like think of that in my head, but I would still interfere, which was it was like my dopamine hit, right?
mhm,
And education gave me something to do with that energy and that need to do it. It didn't always work, but the more I educated myself, the better I did. So pouring myself into that information, taking little bits here and there, I trusted my gut, my intuition, as weak as it was, as to what was BS and what was good. Like if it didn't make sense to me, like when they put him in that rehab and they took him off alcohol and put him off drugs, I mean, I was like, look, I'm no counselor, but that doesn't
Right.
make any sense to
Yeah.
me, right? And so I think like educating yourself, it's kind of like medicine today. You have to be your own advocate and you have to learn and you have to educate yourself so that you can be better in that role. So those are my big takeaways. This week, this time next week, we'll talk about
Trauma.
trauma. I have a feeling that's going to be a 2 or 3-part episode.
Could be. Could
Yeah.
be.
All right.
Okay.
We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.